Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. Before we get started, would you please stand with me and let's salute the flag?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first order of business is National Grid poll petition for Pleasant Street. Do we have a representative?
Yes.
Okay, please. And there was a public notice, so do I have a motion to waive the reading of the public notice?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion, a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, carries. Okay, and just name for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Paulo Sattler.
Okay.
I'm an engineer for National Grid. So National Grid, for this particular area on Whipple Road and Pleasant Street, we're looking to improve the reliability of the area. And to do that, we need to install some new equipment. And for this particular job, we want to install one new pole number 54 here. And if you had the opportunity to go by the location, we stick the location there, and it's in the middle of the island within that intersection. So it's a great place to put a pole. It's not in front of anybody's yard, and we're already actually doing some work there in that area. So this is part of that job. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions from the board?
Okay. Yeah, well, why don't we do, let's open up to the board. We'll pause. I'll open up to the public. We'll close the public hearing and come back to the board. So let's start with the board. Ms. Wellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This telephone pole is going to go on the island right now that's there. Is that going to impact sightlines or anything? Or is it moving?
What do you mean by cycling? Like,
Traffic pulling out of that intersection?
no, I mean, the island is pretty large, so it's going about 7 to 8 feet from the edge of the curb there, and within that island, so it's not going to impede any traffic. We would need a police detail to, while we do the work, we need a police detail there to manage the traffic for us, keep everything safe. But once it's installed, it's not going to impact anybody, vehicles or pedestrian, anything like that.
I don't think it'll impact the vehicles or the pedestrians, more like seeing turning traffic is my concern as it approaches that intersection based on the geometry of that road is my concern. The other concern I have is, have you been out there when some of the work's gone on in that neighborhood?
I did see some of the work, but I haven't been there while it's
Sure.
being done. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've gotten phone calls from abutters near pole 52 who've been blocked into their home by National Grid vehicles and have filed some complaints with National Grid.
Okay.
And I'm just curious because they were treated kind of negatively by National Grid employees. They couldn't get out of their property to retrieve a child from school or go to work, so or do work. So I did receive multiple phone calls from that resident at that location. And I know that she spoke to a National Grid employee who came to her home to file that complaint. But I'm concerned about a mass of trucks that are in that area that are hindering homeowners. And so I wanted to put that on the record.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. I'm glad the homeowner reached out to National Grid and somebody went out there. When you're working within the public space, I think that you need to be respectful of people, and
Yeah, I
if
agree.
they need to leave the home, they need to leave the home. I do understand, trucks are set up as well, like, you can't just move it right away.
Sure.
But at the same time, just talk to the homeowner before, and I'm going to reach out to my supervisor so we can get that message clear to overhead supervisors as well. Make sure that doesn't happen in the future, or at least get the conversation going.
I appreciate that very much in that particular location. I've had National Grid doing work, moving poles in front of my house and have had no issues whatsoever. So I was surprised to hear that, and that's why I wanted to mention that to you this evening. Thank you. No more questions?
How about Mr. Mackey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is about this second part of the ask, so also for permission to lay and maintain underground laterals, cables, and wires. I don't see any of that annotated on the diagram we provided, so how does that play into this request?
Thanks for asking that. So the way I understand it is that's kind of like a boilerplate language. So a lot of times customers will actually install like an underground service from their home going to this pole. So there's a small section of an underground conduit within the public space, let's say 5 feet, 7 feet. So they usually just add that as a language, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're installing it. I know for a fact we're not installing any underground system at this location, so, but that's just the use of the language. It's a kind of boilerplate language to secure rights, but it doesn't mean we're installing it. And I don't see them installing this in the future, it's just the design of the area isn't for that.
Understood. So when a order like this gets opened, how long, I mean, do those rights in perpetuity, or how long does the permission to do that extend?
It's in perpetuity. I
Okay,
do know as well, like when we install our own conduit in the future, let's say, and we do want to own it, we do come back and we have another public hearing for that underground conduit. I think that's more, I'm not sure if it's just a courtesy, but that's been the process in my time at National Grid.
so my request would be if we can take this out, because in the future, once we get, we're making lots of progress on improving our roads, and there's plans to continue to do that. And I would hate to see, we get this paved, everything taken care of, and then we have to tear it up because we've given you guys permission sometime in the future to go and do that. So that would be my one concern there.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two questions to follow on Ms. Wellman's inquiry. I know there's been some work done on Pleasant Street. What's the timeline for a completion of all of the work that's being done? I know there've been some poles replaced, I believe.
I wish I could tell you an honest answer because I didn't review the entire scope of that particular job. I can get back to you on that if you'd like.
Sure, you don't mind.
Tomorrow, the next 2 days, I can.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't have a timeline.
I'm curious, and do you have a line of sight on if this particular pole 54 is approved by the board tonight? Do you have a timeline on when that work would be anticipated?
Well, since they're doing the work right now within that area, I can, if we can approve it today,
Yeah.
and they would want to install it tomorrow, they can. I don't see that happening though.
Yeah.
But let's say within the next 2 to 3 weeks, I can see it being done.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And then my last question just pertains to the work that's currently being undertaken. If my recollection is right, there's either some double poles there or poles that are bolted onto existing poles. Does the project include removal of double poles and, the inadequate poles?
Absolutely. For the amount of poles that are being replaced here, there will be double poles for all of them. So while we do our work and transition through, all the other utilities come by and do a portion of their work. And the last one is Verizon, and they're responsible for removing all the last portion of the pole, whether they're next to on the ground or floating, let's say.
Yeah.
So after we finish our work, they come in and do their work.
And who owns the responsibility for physically removing the non-used pole when it's vacated?
Verizon is responsible for it.
Verizon.
Yeah, because National Grid owns 50% of the pole, and Verizon does it as well.
Okay.
So we install the new poles, they remove the old poles. That's the agreement.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How about Ms. Stronach?
Great question. So I do have a question, and it's very simple. What happens if we don't put this pole here?
Well, our policy is, as a designer myself, is called the least cost to serve, because our rates depend on keeping our engineering plans, most effective and reduce the cost. So per this designer, putting pole 54 with that equipment on it keeps the cost down for the project and increases the reliability. If you don't approve this the way it's designed, I'm sure there's an alternative plan, but it'll be more expensive. Whether there's more work on Marshall Street or Pleasant Street, they can work something out if needed. But it tends to increase the cost, and it effectively increases the cost of the ratepayers themselves because of our regulation through the state. Does that make sense?
It does. The reason for my question is I personally think poles are pretty ugly. And, we're putting these poles, and I realize that, you know, you think that this is a great place to put a pool because it's not near a resident's house, but it's in the middle of everything right there. And just gonna be sticking right up and kind of, to Ms. Wellman's point, it's gonna grab your eye. So I just wanted to know if there was any other options besides this to put this pool there, because there seems to be quite a few pools right there pretty quickly. And I know that there's no underground, but to Mr. Mackey's point, what if we give you this access and then you have to tear that up again? So that's fine. You don't have an alternative plan.
No, we do not have an alternative plan.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
I just have a few, and then we'll open up, because this is a public hearing. Mr. Johnson hit upon the double poles. It's the entire street of Pleasant Street with the double, but that's a work in progress.
Correct, yes.
Obviously, Ms. Wellman hit it. That was kind of messy. It's a tight road with, you know, putting up poles almost from end to end. It's a double pole, and most of them are broken too, so it's definitely an eyesore, but I know that's a work in progress. I did drive all the different angles there, you know, just to make sure, to Ms. Wellman's point, that's where the kids come out of school too. I always say, kind of a like unsafe, you know, new drivers, but where the pole was situated, I had no issues in any direction, you know what I mean? But again, I'm not a traffic expert, but I did drive every angle. So I have no further questions, so I'll pause. Is there anyone from the public that has any public comments? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All's in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I love not taking a roll call vote, isn't it? It's good. All right, so the public hearing is closed. Let's bring it back to the board for questions. Any final questions, concerns, thoughts?
No.
Please, Mr. Mackey.
One alibi, Mr. Chairman. Hearing the discussion that my fellow members had, I do have one additional question. Have any other options been looked at for this area? Because I notice we're adding one pole, we're not removing any, and that cable that's already going from P53 to P97 is being removed, but we're adding pole P54 and adding that straight shot across from P52. So I'm just trying to understand, has anything been explored for alternate options? And if so, what is the value add of making this change where we're not removing or reducing any poles?
I can imagine the designer thought about using pole 53. When I went out there, one of the issues I see is there's tight angles between poles and wires and how they're moving, and a lot of these poles have guy wires attached to them, which makes it difficult to add the equipment we need on the pole. So that's why pole 54 is a good location for us, because it's a straight pole on both sides, so there's no need for guying there. Where the other poles, there might be there are guy wires and anchors there. So that limits our safety space of building on top of the pole. And in addition to that, since these poles are owned by National Grid and Verizon, Verizon may not want to move their wires at all from that pole, because
Which means they all fit.
adding this additional pole doesn't have any benefit to them. You know what I mean? It has a benefit to us, but not necessarily to them.
So if they choose not to move it, as you said earlier, they own half of it, that would mean we have additional poles that are getting left out. So we're adding a pole, and then if they choose not to move, we have more poles that are not being removed.
I wouldn't say that they're not being removed, but they're still being utilized, and they may actually service, you know, home at the house 467. I'm not exactly sure, but Verizon, like us, from my experience with them, is we don't want to own more poles than necessary. So if we need to keep a pole, we're keeping it because we're using it for a specific purpose, and that's all I have to say. Does that answer your question or your concern to some extent?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments from the board? What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer a motion to approve the poll requests on petition 305-03221.
Okay, I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Opposed.
Opposed, so 3-2, the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next order of business is liquor license application 2030 Ocean Street LLC, 345 Main Street.
Drop something.
So this is a public hearing, so do I have a motion to waive the reading of the public notice?
So moved.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Name, please, for the record.
Good evening, everyone. Andrew Upton, attorney for the applicant, and with me are Dan Newcomb, the owner and proposed manager of record, and Glenn Lawler, a 30-year veteran of the industry who's working as a consultant on this project.
And just want to describe kind of what you're asking for on behalf of the board, and just a little bit about yourself and history and all that good stuff.
Of course. Sure, we'd be glad to. First, I'd like to briefly describe how we comply with the legal standard for a grant of license, and then have Dan describe the concept in more detail, along with his outreach to the stakeholders and the neighborhood. Of course, we're glad to answer any questions during the process or at any time. The first thing to look at, of course, is the character and fitness of the applicant. Dan meets this test because he's successfully opened and operated several different package stores with no violations and no negative impacts on neighbors. He has a clean record, and he also has experience in the on-premise liquor sales when his family owns several restaurants. We believe the best new licensee is someone who has successfully been a part of a licensed establishment before, and Dan has those credentials. He's been approved with this wine and market concept in Cambridge, Quincy, and Lexington within the last year. The second factor is the public need for a license at this location. Dan's concept fits this location, and the landlord, the neighbors, and everyone else ought to be happy with a clean, well-run store that focuses on good wines, craft beers, and artisanal spirits. Additionally, we believe that the wine and market concept fits with the Wamisit Plaza. Not only would we be a good tenant and help the landlord recover from the pandemic, but we would also support traffic calming, signage, landscaping, and other improvements in the area. The public need for a license at this location also goes to the use of this license for the benefit of the city and the taxpayers. We propose a brand-new store that is poised to serve existing residents who don't currently have convenient access in the plaza to a full-service liquor store. And we think it would also generate business for the rest of the commercial establishments in the plaza. This store will generate rent payments, real estate and sales tax payments, jobs, and economic activity with a new license at this location. The license is a valuable asset, and we believe that the location and the concept is the highest and best use for this license. We believe it's an ideal location because it's far from any church, school, or library. It's far from the nearest school. It's in a plaza with a traffic pattern designed for retail uses. It's in a retail storefront in the plaza that was designed and vetted for car trips and deliveries. It's an established retail location with plenty of parking. The current concentration of licenses shows that this location needs a license due to the thousands of car trips generated by Walmart. We're unlikely to create excessive noise or light pollution as this is a designed resale space. Finally, we've reached out to elected officials, public safety officials, and our team has walked the neighborhood getting feedback from residents and businesses on this application. The response has been positive. We have letters of support from the residents, and we've reached out to police, fire officials with our detailed plans. So with those technicalities sort of out of the way, I'd like to have Dan just give a brief overview of his concept and experience.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Dan Newcomb. I live in Marshfield. My wife and my 3 daughters that don't live with us anymore, but they're grown through college. I've been in business since I was a young kid. My dad had a chain of 26 restaurants, so I literally started when I was 14, 15 years old working at the restaurant. And my family still has one of those restaurants today in Milton. We've been there for 55 years. And so I know what it's like to work in a small community and be a part of that community. We've done softball and baseball and all kinds of raffles and awards and banquets. And my dad was Citizen of the Year because of that. And when he died, almost everybody that came to his funeral had worked there, had worked for us. So it's really important to us that we come in and do a nice concept. I think that for us to build a business that's going to be sustainable and over the long term, we have to support the community. And I think that by doing so, that means our responsibility is to make sure that we serve alcohol safe, that people are, anybody that enters the store is carded. That's our policy. We have this particular concept that we're doing, it's a wine and market concept. It's very similar. A liquor store is a liquor store, just like coffee at Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks is coffee. And we'd like to look at this concept as more of a Starbucks-type location. You have some premiers, some very nice stores in town. We want to be above and beyond those stores. I think that from a convenience factor at that center, it's a great location. We can provide good service and pricing and give the customers and the residents, more choice. So I think it's a very safe location. I'm very mindful of the responsibility of having a liquor license and being granted one, and I appreciate your time. And I think that I went back and looked at the store again and again, and we think that the location in the center is good. It's not out in the front. It's not in people's faces. It's more of a casual. It's in the back. If you want to come visit, come visit. And we're hoping that we can attract, some of the traffic from Walmart and the other businesses. We've spent time with the customers, trying to understand what they really wanted. And what they don't want is they don't want a lottery liquor store. They don't want Bud Light signs in the window. They don't want lottery signs in the window. They want a nice place that they can go shop. And that's what we'd like to provide. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have any questions on our presentation we delivered, we tried to, get as much in there that was meaningful without, fluffing it up. I think the most important part of that whole presentation is the letters of support, that we went out and met with people and talked with them and asked them about, what they thought of the concept. There's 31 residents of Tewksbury that signed our letter that we handed them and asked them if they'd sign it, and there were 10 visitors, people that were not from Tewksbury but frequent the site. We thought that was important to include in the binder as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Okay, let's open up the board. Let's reverse order here. Mr. Mackey, what do you got?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to open by commending you guys on the preparation. This was a great package.
Thank
The
you.
outreach speaks volumes. Most of the questions that I would normally ask in a liquor license or transfer of license, you guys addressed in this. So I think my first question is, you mentioned that there were 3 approvals for similar concepts.
Correct.
Are any of those locations open yet?
No, we have the Lexington, the building's not completed yet. It's probably not going to be completed until September or October. So, and that's what they say. So we're anticipating probably January next year being in that space. Quincy received approval 2 weeks ago, and that store was formerly a dry cleaner, and the space is going to require a tremendous amount of work to put that space in order. And the Cambridge location, small space, 2,000 square feet, right in the Inman Square. We have contractors going in there tomorrow to start looking at that. That store, we expect that store to be open sometime end of April, probably. All the equipment, the thing that's holding most of the retailers up right now is equipment, trying to get shelving and refrigeration and coolers and all that. We have those in storage. I have a container full of equipment in storage that we can utilize. We know how to do this from a value perspective, really being efficient. I had the 3 stores inside Stop and Shop. I was a tenant of Stop and Shop, and I opened up stores in their locations. And we learned Stop and Shop was very gracious. They gave us a lot of equipment to use that we were able to take with us and recondition. So it's all in great shape that we can reuse again. So that's a competitive advantage I think we have.
Awesome, thank you. And for this location, if it were approved, what's your timeline look like for?
Would expect another 3 months from the ABCC probably. So that's, sometime in April. I'd like to see us get the store open by July 1st, if at the very latest September. But I think that, it's realistic that we could have it done. And there's not a lot of interior work that needs to be done at all. It's mostly cosmetic, and it's like a stage set. So you don't have to, all the money's in the wires and the plumbing that's already in the walls. So it's really coming in and making it aesthetically pleasing, bring it to the standard that we want it to be.
Awesome, thank you. I have no other questions, and I will say I'm a big proponent of this type of concept. And
Thank you.
Thank you for choosing Tewksbury to try to bring this business to.
Thanks, Mr. Mackey.
Okay, very good. How about Mr. Johnson?
Sure, thank you, and good evening to you.
Good evening.
I have been here sitting at this table for a number of years, and I will say to Mr. Mackey's comment as well, this is probably the most comprehensive presentation that anyone in the liquor licensing arena has given us. So
Right.
I want to commend you for that.
Thank you.
I've gone through this. My question is more geared around informing those who are watching this meeting, and it deals with the issue of, you touched on a little bit in your comments, but I'd like you to elaborate, a little bit more about compliance,
Of
making
course.
sure that we're not serving to minors, all of the issue. What are the controls that you specifically use in all your stores?
Of course.
To make sure that we're in compliance?
Sure. So I'm very proud that with the thousands of transactions that we did inside Stop and Shop in the locations, and the thousands of transactions that I did with my dad and his locations, I've never had a violation. I've never been asked to come before a board. I've never had the police approach us. It's just not worth it. I've been sober for 34 years. I know what liquors, what it can do to people. And if, my children are not small anymore, but when they were, it was, it was something that was always on my mind as a parent, making sure that the kids, got home safe. And, so we'll have everybody will be ID'd. Anybody in the store, regardless of age, will be ID'd. We'll check their IDs and make sure that they're, able to buy. There's no reason for children, anybody under 21 to be in the store. It's an adult beverage store. There's nothing in there that the kids would want, or anybody other than somebody purchasing alcohol would want. Our management will be, we'll select the general manager. We'll probably bring them back before the board at some point in time for your approval. But, they're 100% responsibility. The buck stops with me. But when they're there, it's up to them. So we'll have we're going to have a relatively large investment here, and I want to protect that. So it's very important that we be a good part of the community, be a good neighbor, and just watch everything.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank
I
you.
have no other questions.
Very good. How about Ms. Stronach?
So, not to be beating the drum, but this was very impressive.
Thank you.
And I did appreciate the residents signing those papers. I was glad that you gave me a little bit of background about how that happened. So you actually were at the Walmart and pulled people as they came in looking for that? Is that?
We actually walked up and down, from AT&T to Harlow's, all up and
Yeah.
down there, and
Stuff?
that's where we spent most of our time. And Walmart, they don't want people walking around the park.
Yeah.
I wish we could have sat out there. We probably could have done a lot more. But it wasn't about the numbers. It was really about having the conversations with people.
Yeah.
We want to do business where we think we can be successful and where people want us. It's not doing business where people don't want you is a challenge. So we wanted to be welcome to the community. We'll put our best foot forward and earn people's trust and respect and earn their business, hopefully.
Great. The other thing that you mentioned, because I don't have a lot of questions, but the other thing that you mentioned was you talked about with your dad and how there were job opportunities. So, and then you talked about having a GM. What kind of job opportunities do you think that this will bring? Do you have staff in mind? Do you
Yeah,
do locals? Like, how do you?
Yeah,
what's
so
your
we
staffing mind?
anticipate at peak time during the holidays, we'd probably have anywhere between 6 and 8 employees. I think as we, during the balance of the year is probably a general manager and 4 or 5 others, and some sprinkling some part-time. But it's really important to us that our people are trained. And Glenn spent 30 years in Horizon Beverage. He was in charge of the Gillette Stadium, Boston Garden, Fenway Park, and the casino. So training was a big part of Glenn's, training the staff on being able to service the customer best, making sure that if somebody wanted a bottle of wine, we were approachable, and we know how to do that. So that's a big part of our business plan, is being approachable and being able to help people. My wife goes into a store and she said she has no idea what she's ordering, but if she wants something, we want to be able her to come to us, and we'll give her some hints or give her some ideas where to go.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
How about Ms. Wellman?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to repeat my colleague's commentary that I've never seen anything like this, so thank you very much. I
You're welcome.
appreciate the effort that you went to put into this and give us so much information, and particularly, I thank you for being proactive in reaching out to your neighbors and to residents in the area, so that they're aware of what's going on, because sometimes that doesn't happen, and so it's a different situation.
Right.
So I really appreciate that. I read your compliance program. I looked through your package, and I liked the state-of-the-art systems that you were going to be using, the practices and protocols that you'll be employing. So I'm appreciative, as Mr. Mackey said, that you are interested in coming to Tewksbury. My colleagues asked all the questions I had, particularly with regard to your GM and how that process will undergo. My only question to you is, what would be your day-to-day interaction with, it looks like you're building kind of a little series of these, so
yeah,
what
so
would your day-to-day?
I've been since I was a kid, I was groomed to, I've been very used to running multiple units. My father had 26 restaurants that I ran, so I've been able to do that. And I also worked with Aubon Pan. I was the VP of recruiting and had multiple other, so I've been able to run a team. And just the caliber, Glenn Lawler behind us, he's the caliber. The rest of my team is as good as Glenn is. So I'm certain that we're going to be able to identify the right people and put the right people, we'd like to say the right people on the bus in the right positions, right? And it's all about, growing our business, being a good neighbor, and keeping people safe, and protecting our license. It's a valuable commodity, and we don't want to, make a mistake, and I don't want this to be the first board that I have to come back and visit. What I didn't mention that we did speak with, Glenn met directly with Alexander Loader from Community Development. He also met with Deputy Chief Vasas and with the Police Chief, Chief Columbus. We tried to get to him. It was very difficult to get to, but we delivered a complete package to him as well. We think it's important that we want him to know that we're, on the same team, and that we'll provide them with anything. We'll have video, and we'll make sure that they have access to it. To answer your question, my role is to really get this up and running. This is going to take a lot of effort to get, through the ABCC, get it finished, and then get the construction going, work with the landlord, make sure things are right, and then put the team in place. Once the team's in place, as I said to Mr. Johnson, the buck stops with me. So it doesn't matter who's in front of who's at the store, who's in front. It's my responsibility, and I'll be in, constant contact with those people.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
No further questions. Mr. Chairman.
Very good. I was just going to use two words, very impressive indeed. And
I think, with all due respect, I think it's really important. That's, that all that's available. And it's the kind of questions that I would expect you to ask. So we wanted to get it in front of you ahead of time. It's not hard to produce something like that. It's just sitting down and paying attention. So I'm glad that you appreciate it. It's important.
well, I can tell by your character and your words that you're very genuine, and you could see it within all the paperwork. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
Very impressive. So thank you for that. So
Thank you.
I'm going to pause here. This is a public hearing, so I'll pause. Anyone in the public would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved, Mr.
A
Chairman.
motion, and I have a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, so the public hearing is closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm the motion man tonight.
Okay,
So I will offer a motion to approve the application as submitted and issuance of an off-premises package store all alcoholic beverages license.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second.
Question.
Second by Ms. Wellman. Please, discussion.
I just want to Mr. Johnson's point earlier, for the residents, this is the first part in the process. There is other steps that the gentleman in front of us need to take to get this business off the ground, including going to ABCC. So I just want to make sure that people understand that this is a process, and this is the first step in that process.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Well
very
done.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Pleasure to meet
Part of the
you
community.
for the first and apparently last time.
Well, hopefully you can come in as a customer
Let
once
us
we get
know when it
going.
opens, yeah.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Be back with you.
Welcome to Tewksbury.
Good luck. Thank you.
All right, the third order of business is class license transfer application. TY of Tewksbury LLC, 468 Main Street. Do we have representation? Please. So again, this is a public hearing. Do I have a motion to waive the reading of the public notice?
So moved, Mr.
I
Chairman.
have a motion, and I have a second by Mr. Johnson. All those in favor? Aye. Saying aye. Aye, it's unanimous. Okay, I think you guys know the drill by now, so just a quick introduction, a little bit what you're trying to, what transaction you're seeking to get approvals for tonight.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, Select Board. My name is Jason LaCroix. I'm a partner with this dealership and 6 of the other auto fair dealerships, and this is James Davis. He'll also be a partner and also be the general manager of the store. We are looking for your approval to transfer the Class 1 dealer license from Danvers T2 Inc., DBA Ira Toyota 2, to TY of Tewksbury, DBA Auto Fair Toyota of Tewksbury.
Okay. So let's, same deal, let's bring it to the board, then I'll open for the public hearing, close the public hearing, and go from there. So how about Ms. Wellman? Questions?
When are you planning, if it were approved tonight, when would this sale go through and when would you rebrand?
The sale will go through tomorrow, and it would be rebranded to Auto Fair Toyota of Tewksbury.
Immediately?
Yes.
So we're looking for, okay. Do you plan any major changes in operation at that location? with
No
the
major changes?
Earlier, later hours that might impact the butters, stuff like that?
No. No change in hours.
Okay. All right. I don't think I have any more questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very good. How about Ms. Stronach?
I do not have any questions, but I do have a comment. I just want to, you do have the abutters list in here, and I noticed that we didn't get anything from any abutters. You having a hard time hearing me? Sorry. You do have the abutters list in here, and we have not received anything from the abutters. Have you heard from any of the abutters?
I have not.
Okay, just want to make sure that that was all taken care of. Thank you.
Very good. How about Mr. Johnson?
Just one question. I believe Auto Fair or an Auto Fair was previously a business in Tewksbury.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So you're going to make another go at it here in town?
So the location of that Nissan store was very, very difficult. We ended up moving it to Chelmsford. But no, there was no intent of moving this. This is a beautiful facility.
Yeah.
We're very, very excited to move into that facility.
It's, if I have the right location in the back of my mind, it's basically a brand-new
It is a brand new
facility.
building. It's actually our nicest store.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mr.
Very good. How about Mr. Mackey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no additional questions. Everything appears to be in order. Great packet, and hopefully, wish you guys luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, same here. Very thorough packet. I think, Mr. Montour, we had all the approvals required from a town standpoint, so I'll pause. Again, public hearing, anyone like to talk at this time? Seeing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. What is the pleasure of the board?
Go ahead, Todd.
I guess it's my night.
Where's motion man?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the application as presented for the transfer of the Class 1 dealer license.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second by Ms. Stronach. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for doing
Look forward
business
to being here.
in Tewksbury. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Right, that's right. Okay, this brings us to residents. Any residents at this time?
Okay, good.
Seeing there's no residents, we're going to move to new business. So, Mr. Montour, we have a signature page for the annual and special town warrants that time of year.
It is. Just need the board to approve and sign them.
Questions from the board?
I just can't believe we're already here.
That time of year.
So fast.
So what's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to approve the warrant posted.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next order of business is the signature page for the annual town election warrant.
There's no discussion. I'll make a motion to approve the signature page for the annual town warrant,
Okay.
election warrant.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Mr. Mackey. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is unanimous. It brings us to the,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
can I
please.
interject briefly on that item?
I have the signature, so,
Oh, you have, okay, so that's fine. I'm going to save my question for later. Thank you.
sure?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So which brings us to the enterprise funds and capital improvement plan presentation. Mr. Montori, I'm just going to slide over this one a little bit.
There is a folder that
If the board could sign the documents in it, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go through the presentation for the FY23 Enterprise Fund budgets and the capital improvement plan for FY23 through FY2027, capital improvement plan, otherwise known as the CIP. The presentation is similar to what I've done in the past. I think we cover a lot of good information. Stop me with any questions as we go through the PowerPoint. So tonight we're going to just cover in the beginning just standard definitions that we will be using throughout the budget process and this presentation. We're going to cover tonight the FY23 enterprise funds, which include telemedia, water, enterprise budgets. We're going to review water enterprise capital, recommendation on rates, the sewer enterprise budget and enterprise capital, recommendation on sewer rates, the stormwater enterprise budget, the stormwater enterprise capital, a recommendation on stormwater fee, and then we'll review, in general terms, the FY23 to FY27 capital improvement plan. First, it's always good to go back over quickly the definitions of the terms we're going to use tonight. An enterprise fund essentially is a fund that's authorized by Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F and a half, and it's a separate accounting and financial reporting mechanism for a community to provide a service that a fee is charged for, and that we recover all of our costs, or most of the costs, through that fee. It allows the community to demonstrate the cost of the service and how it's recovered through the fee. In the enterprise fund, you can recover all of the costs for the delivery of that service, both all indirect, direct, and capital. On the slide, you'll see reasons why you should adopt an enterprise fund. Also, on the slide, you'll see that the town has established enterprise funds for sewer in October of 2002, water in May of 2005, telemedia in May of 2016, and stormwater enterprise fund in October of 2019, all approved at town meeting.
One thing on that, Mr. Montori, as far as the fees, isn't that privy on the board as far as the fees fit?
So the enterprise fund is approved at town meeting, and the Board of Selectmen approves the fees.
Set the rates and/or
Set the rates,
fees,
yes.
but that's.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Another term that's commonly used, obviously, is the property tax levy, which is the revenue we generate through property taxes, both real and personal property. We're governed by Proposition 2.5. We have to stay within the levy limit of Proposition 2.5. The only ways that you can go over that levy limit is by an override, and there are 3 overrides. An operating override, which increases the property tax levy forever, unless there is a vote to have an underride, which reduces the levy back. There's a capital outlay expenditure exclusion, which is just a temporary increase of the tax levy to fund the capital projects. Once that project's funded and paid for, the levy goes back down. And then there's a debt exclusion, which is an increase in the levy limit to pay for principal and interest on debt. Once the debt's paid, the levy limit is reduced back to the normal levy. Tonight, we'll be reviewing the capital improvement plan. There are 2 terms. There's a capital budget and a capital improvement plan. They're interchangeable. The only difference is the capital improvement plan goes a little bit further and identifies items that are not recommended as part of the capital plan. Stabilization fund, which will be talked about again tonight, is a fund that is approved by MGL Chapter 40, Section 5B, which communities establish and set funds aside. In the past, they were set aside for emergencies, but the law changed to allow the fund to be used for any lawful purpose, for things such as capital or other future spending purposes. And then the general fund is just the fund that's used to account for most of the financial resources and activities in the town that are not in an enterprise fund or a special revenue fund or a special fund. When we talk about the term raise and appropriate, that's just raising funds either through taxation or through a local receipt, such as a user fee or a rate. Indirect costs or allocations we'll talk about tonight. Also, a cost for services that are reflected in the operating budget of the entity providing the service. For example, if there's an indirect cost for providing water service by the value of time spent by a non-water department employee, say such as myself, that time can be charged off to the Water Enterprise Fund. Free cash, this is the remaining funds at the end of a fiscal year when we close all of our books. And this is the surplus that we have at the end of the year that's generated through revenue that's higher than our projection, and any budgets that have unexpended funds that get turned back at the end of the year. Currently, we have $600,000 in free cash that's been set aside at the beginning of the fiscal year that we'll use, if needed, for any snow and ice deficits that we might have. Retained earnings is essentially free cash for the enterprise funds. This is revenue that is closed out at the end of the fiscal year that exceeds projections, and any budgets from the enterprise funds that are unexpended and closed out. Currently, water retained earnings, which are certified after July 1st, have $2,271,795. Sewer retained earnings has $6,699,211. Cable retained earnings is $2,244,348. And finally, stormwater retained earnings. This was the first year that we closed out the stormwater enterprise fund. That has $132,686. So the first enterprise fund that we're going to review is the Telemedia Enterprise Fund, which is basically the cable television fund that we have, budget that we have. The budget for cable television did not have any major changes. Salaries increased in regard to the cost of living increase, which was 2.25%. And any step increases for the two full-time employees that work for the telemedia department. The operating budget decreased actually $5,800 in two areas, mainly in the areas of repairs and maintenance. It was reduced $5,000 because fuel for the van was less than projected, so that budget was adjusted. And then communications decreased $800 due to other means of live streaming through the telemedia department. There were no capital outlay requests. Indirect costs, again, which were the allocations, increased $1,790. There was an increase in health insurance of 5%, Medicare taxes based on payroll, which impacted or generated that $1,790 increase. There will be a capital expense that we'll raise through the Telemedia Enterprise Fund in the amount of $229,500, and it's for the upgrade and replacement of town hall meeting cameras, switches, enterprise room system, and audio equipment in this room and in the small room. As the board knows, we received many complaints about the sound in this room, so next year, Brian Dorrington is going to make that the top capital expense for the department. And we'll raise that through the budget that's presented on this slide. As you can see under capital expenses, we'll raise it through the projected cable revenue that we receive from cable franchise fees. This next slide gives you an indication of the next 4 years of capital expenditures that the department will have, the largest being in FY '23, as we just mentioned, for the upgrade of town hall video and sound equipment. The funds for all of this capital will come from the franchise fees that we receive from Comcast and Verizon. There's enough within the budget to pay for not just the operating budget, but also the capital that's being presented. As you can see from this slide, Comcast franchise fee and capital collected in FY '21 was $298,435. Verizon's franchise fee was $313,869. And the total revenue for FY '21 was $612,304. This is definitely going to be an area we need to watch in the future, as many subscribers change from cable TV to other live streaming. So we may see this revenue go down. That's why having healthy retained earnings to help pay for future costs will be important. But this is an area we're going to need to really keep an eye on. Right now, we've been able to meet or exceed the $600,000 that we project in revenue. But again, I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we need to watch this carefully. Any questions on telemedia?
Mr. Chairman, through you. Thank you. Just really briefly, I'm glad to see that you're doing town hall video and sound upgrades. One thing I would request for the community is that there is an investigation and purchase of mobile or outdoor audio for the numerous events that we have, like our Veterans Day and our Memorial Day ceremonies. We had the fire department ceremony the other day. For those kinds of activities that happen outside, to be able to have a powerful audio system would be great. What we have now just doesn't meet the need of the community for the various places we go, so.
No, it's actually a great point. It's been brought up by others, especially those that are involved with the community events. That's something we're looking at now. And if we can do something this year, we'll try to do it this year.
It'd be great if we could do it this year. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sorry, thank you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. When we were doing the work to look at it, and maybe Selectman Mackey can help us with this, but the problem that we're looking at with the wireless is somebody being able to hack into that pretty easily. So I just want to let you know that in order to get a system that might be sound, it might be pricier than what people would expect. So I just want to say that that was a grave consideration that we didn't take into consideration. We were thinking, oh, can we get these great speakers? It's not as simple as that. So I just want to mention that.
Thank you for that.
Should I jump on real
Please,
quick?
Mr. Mackey.
Risk mitigation and management, we will figure that out. That won't be
Yeah.
a problem.
Okay.
I just want to say Brian and team are awesome. Keep up the great work, my man. All right, sorry.
So the next enterprise fund to review is the Water Enterprise Fund. There are 2 budgets within the Water Enterprise Fund to review, and I'll start with the first being water distribution budget. This is for all water operations outside of the water treatment plant. This handles all of our pump stations, our water lines, anything that's outside of the plant and in the streets. The water distribution budget for FY '23 for salaries is actually going down $20,083. We do have a salary increase for cost of living of 2.25%, the normal step increases in longevity. But the decrease is due to a retirement that we had and paid out vacation and sick leave in FY '22 that is obviously not needed in FY '23, and that's the reason for the decrease. There's an increase in the expenses of $15,744. Most of that is in maintenance and repairs based on just the cost of supplies that the water department has to maintain the system, to address water breaks and things like that. Just something we're all seeing, not just in the town, but in our personal lives, just the cost of supplies and goods have just increased. There's no capital outlay appropriation in FY '23. The water filtration budget, salaries are increasing $11,863, again, for a cost of living increase of 2.25% for staff, normal step increases, and longevity changes. The operating expenses are increasing $67,627. We're seeing a large increase in chemicals, which is based on plant usage and cost of chemicals. Our residual disposal cost is increasing $52,290, and this is just a cost to dispose of the treatment plant sludge and the need for a consultant to assist with proper disposal. This is going to be an area that we're going to study over the next year to determine the best way to dispose of our treatment plant sludge and hopefully make it more cost effective. We have an increase in computer equipment of $5,300 to replace 5 computers at the water treatment plant. We saw a decrease in chemicals of $5,900 due to less mailings, and repairs and maintenance decreased $17,330. Since the plant has been upgraded, we're seeing a decrease in that area. The next slide just combines, gives you a view of the water distribution and the water filtration budget combined. It also includes other areas that are raised in the Water Enterprise Fund, such as the Reserve Fund, occupational health, other post-employment benefits, and debt. Also gives you an outline of the indirect costs for each of the areas of the budget that have indirect costs, which went up $78,599, mainly in 3 areas. Health insurance increased 5%. Retirement increased based on the assessment from Middlesex Retirement. That was a 7.2% increase. And property and liability insurance increased 10%. The sheet also gives you an indication of the revenues that we're projecting for water. We're projecting revenue of $7,575,683. This is projected to generate a $22,308 surplus in FY '23. This next slide gives you an idea, an outline of the capital that we're requesting in the 5-year capital plan from FY '23 to FY '27. Over that time frame, we are requesting and projecting $18,214,231 of water projects, 13.2 are for water distribution and improvement, 3.6 is for water tank maintenance and upgrade, $625,000 is for the continuation of our hydrant replacement program, and $727,250 for vehicle replacement. Now, over the next 5 years, we will spend retained earnings, we will use the Water Stabilization Fund, and we will borrow funds to pay for these capital projects. Currently, again, as I mentioned earlier, retained earnings has $2,271,795. The balance in the Water Stabilization Fund is $1,918,932. Of note, at the bottom of the slide, I just want to mention that even though we are seeking $13.2 million in water distribution projects over the next 5 years, there's a need for another 10.5 in the 5 years beyond that, from FY '28 to FY '32, bringing the total to a little over $23.7 million. In addition to that, built into these numbers will be the cost on an annual basis to start replacing the water meters in the community. Now, I know it just feels like we just installed all the water meters, but it has been 10 years, and that's about the life expectancy for the meters. We're projecting to start FY '23 with $86,981, which is in a special fund that we have. That's going to help us evaluate the need in the community. But in the out years, we'll start at $50,000 and then eventually go to $75,000 a year and maybe grow from there. But we're not sure if the entire meters need to be replaced, the readers need to be replaced, what different components would need to be replaced. But That process needs to start. We are not going to approach it as we did the last meter project, which is doing it all at once. We're just going to do so many on an annual basis. And that's going to be the routine, probably ongoing. The next slide gives you an outline of the water distribution projects for FY22. We'll be undertaking $3.6 million in water distribution projects in that should be 23, I'm sorry. 23, using ARPA funds that the board approved this past July. We'll be seeking funding for hydrant replacement, $125,000 using water retained earnings. $3.6 million for upgrades and maintenance to the Astor Street water tank. We will borrow $1.8 million and use $1.8 in retained earnings to address this project. And then finally, $145,000 for vehicle replacement that'll be shared between the Water Enterprise Fund and the Sewer Enterprise Fund.
Montori, just for clarification purposes, the first item, 3.6, 3.7 million, can you just, for the benefit of the public, these are not local raised funds, right? Can you just explain the ARPA?
Sure. So the federal government provided ARPA funding to all the communities throughout the country. And the town, and this was all COVID-related funding. And it was part of the America Recovery Act. And the town received 2 allotments of money that totaled approximately $9.6 million, I believe. And the board voted, and there was different ways you can use the funds, but in the beginning, it was very specific to be used for water, sewer, or water and sewer, or some other type uses that were not infrastructure related. They since made it more flexible to use the ARPA funds, but the board in July, based on a recommendation from the administration, are using all of the funds to address water distribution improvements based on the amount of work that needs to be done within the system. Once that was approved in July, the DPW already had a 5-year plan in place in locations that they would undertake and design, and they were off and running doing the work. And this just reflects the work that will be done in FY23.
So locally, we're getting the benefit. From a budgetary perspective, it's somewhat neutral in that it doesn't, we're not impacting rates or any of that.
It's actually helping keep rates level for this year because we have that. It allowed us to avoid borrowing funds in FY23 and FY24, which allowed us to stabilize rates at least for 1 year, this coming year.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
This next slide just gives you an indication of the percent of the budget that is debt. We have a large amount of debt in our Water Enterprise Fund, but we have a large amount of work that we've done, whether it's upgrading the water treatment plant or undertaking water distribution projects. This next slide reviews the revenue for water, that I mentioned earlier. We're projecting a little over $7.5 million in water revenue, $7,015,683 from user fees, which are the rates, which will generate a surplus of $22,308. This next slide gives you an indication of what the budget has been in the past 10 years and the revenue that was received for those years. As you can see, in some years, our revenue is much higher based on the amount of usage. Other years, it's the amount is a lot tighter. But water and sewer, all of it's based on usage. This past couple of years, we've had a high usage, so we've been fortunate enough to see a high amount of revenue compared to projections. But there are years that, when it's very wet, that we see less. Now going into the water rates, the assumptions that we use for the FY23 water rates, the first rates are not increasing in FY '23. This will be the fourth year that we will not be increasing rates. The last time we increased rates was in FY '19, and that was 3.5%. So this will be the fourth year in a row. Now, next year, you will see an increase most likely, in the year after that, but it's still early to project. Based on what we've looked at so far, next year's rate increase, if all holds true, and we don't have any retained earnings to use, the rate increase could be a 4% increase. But again, each year we adjust accordingly.
Please.
I'd just like to make a comment about the rates. The reason we're basically not having a rate increase now is the point that Mr. Johnson just made about the opera money. But I remember a time on this board when the rates maintained for many, many years. And because they were maintained for many, many years, when we did have to put in a rate increase, it was a bit of a sticker shock to our residents. So while I appreciate that next year is going to hold true at 4%, which, does seem like a hefty amount, I think that that's a reasonable amount moving forward, considering that we haven't had a rate increase in 4 years. And I just want to note that for the record, because for a long time, there were no decisions made. And unfortunately, the costs do increase and you do have to raise the rate. So I just want to put that out there, because I don't want to see this board put in that position again. It was not a fun vote.
I have faith that Mr. Montero will get those well under 4%.
I appreciate that faith you have in me.
Under 3.
Just moving on. So the other assumption, obviously, as I mentioned, water usage is a big part of this. And we're using, as part of the assumptions for water usage, we're using the actual usage in August of '21, December of '21, and April of '21 billing cycles. The annual water usage is projected to be 659 million gallons, which is an increase of 9.3 million gallons over the previous fiscal year. The collection rate, as we've used in the past, is 95%. The rate projection includes all of the capital improvements within the 5-year capital improvement plan, and it annually funds water distribution upgrades, and it uses opera funds in FY '23 and FY '24 for water distribution. This next slide just is the other tiers we currently have, and as I mentioned, they're not increasing.
There's no change to the tiers.
No change to the tiers. Last time I think we changed the tiers in FY '18, I believe. And I think we changed them in FY '11 and then again in '18. But there's no need to change them right now. This next slide just gives you an indication of the average tax bill based upon different usage. The highlighted areas, the typical usage is about 55,000 gallons a year. The average usage that's used when rates are projected is 90,000. This next slide gives you an indication of the state average. There has been a survey that an engineering firm, Ty and Bond, does that provides some good information on the state average for water and sewer. They have not done one or updated it since 2017, so I continue to use those numbers. The MWRA did a survey in 2021. Their average water bill is $687. Also, as part of their survey, the MWRA probably surveys another 40 or 50 towns that they feel are similar to their communities. In those non-MWRA communities, their average bill was $584. Tewksbury's is $911. So. And then just comments on the enterprise fund and the rates. We just need to constantly review the impact water distributions improvements will have on the rates. Anytime we can utilize other funding sources to minimize the impact to the rates, we will. But, the importance of water distribution improvements is a top priority for us. And it'll definitely be one of those items that impact the rates going forward. But as many of us know, the amount of water breaks we have in town, the water quality in town, residents have raised as a major issue, and we need to address that. Water usage, we always need to make sure we're reviewing water usage. We need to always understand what type of season we had when we're projecting water usage, whether it was a dry season, a wet season. You want to use something that's more typical or in between. Projection for future years, as I mentioned, after this year, we're projecting rate increases, but each year those will adjust based on budgets, allocations, capital improvements, and what our retained earnings are. Retained earnings, we should try to generate as much as we can to build upon our retained earnings. It does help with our capital projects. It helps reduce future rate impacts. And then capital projects in general, as I mentioned, water distribution improvements are going to be the biggest part of our capital improvement plan over the next 10 to 15 years.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
through you to the town manager, do you need action this evening on rates, or is that something you want to defer to at a later point?
Whatever the board's comfortable with. I wasn't planning on any action tonight because you're seeing it for the first time. So we can take it up when we do the town meeting warrant, or pick a date in March, we can decide on all of it.
Okay, all right. Before you change your mind, I want to get on that.
You can vote the zero. It's okay. We vote the zero.
Someone may want an increase.
Please.
Just really briefly, you're projecting a $9 million increase, 9 million gallon increase in usage, and I was just curious what was behind your projection.
Again, we used the April of 21, August of 21, and December of 21 billing cycles, and we pulled the usage right out of the munis reports for those billing cycles, and that's what we used. So
July was very wet.
Yes, well, we looked at that. So we looked at
Yeah.
the different flows from the plant, we looked at the usage, and there were a few weeks that were, and then there were a few weeks that were dry. So we felt that in the end, it really was fairly typical for the whole year. We compared it to the previous years when we had some very dry weather. And we just felt based on what we saw for usage that the wet periods of time were offset by more dry periods of time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sewer Enterprise Fund. There's only one sewer budget to review. The sewer enterprise budget in regard to maintaining the collection system and the pump stations that we have, 48 pump stations we have, right? 47? I have 48. I guess I'm assuming we're going to have another one. 47 pump stations, which I think we must have the most in the state.
Oh, yeah.
So those need to be maintained. The sewer enterprise fund salaries decreased, again, due to an employee retiring in FY '22 and not needing that funding in FY '23. Salaries did increase with a cost of living increase like everyone else of 2.25%, step increases and longevity changes also. On the operating side, utilities increased within the 9 generators that we have and the 47 pump stations that we provide electricity to, and it's based on just usage going through the stations. Lowell Sewer has also increased or projected to increase. We never know until they finalize the assessment based on the allocable costs to the town of Tewksbury based on our flow and the flow of the entire plant. Debt service decreased $8,727. Allocations, the indirect costs increased also this year. Just want to get back to the... Also increased $31,301, mainly in the area of group health insurance, which increased $19,900 for the 5% increase to the premium. Medicare increase based again on the function of payroll, and a 10% increase in property and liability insurance. Capital for sewer, we're projecting a little over $4.1 million between fiscal year '23 and fiscal year 2027. $1,650,000 is for inflow and infiltration control, $1,740,000 for pump station improvements, and then $727,250 for fleet equipment replacement. The capital improvements for FY '23 alone will be $985,000, $250,000 for I&I control, $590,000 for sewer pump station improvements, and $145,000 for fleets and equipment replacement that will be shared with the Water Enterprise Fund. All of the capital improvements in FY '23 will be paid for by retained earnings. All of the capital improvements over the next 5 years will be paid for by using retained earnings and the Sewer Stabilization Fund. The Sewer Stabilization Fund has a little over $3.9 million in it currently, and sewer retained earnings, as you mentioned earlier, has a little over $6.6 million. The important note with sewer retained earnings, it's not only paying for our capital improvements, but we're utilizing sewer retained earnings on an annual basis over the next 5 to 6 years to help offset the high debt that we have in sewer. If you go back to the budget page, we'll be using retained earnings to help offset the debt. As you can see, debt is $3.7 million within the Sewer Enterprise Fund, and the retained earnings will help offset that to keep rates stabilized. This slide gives you an indication of how much debt is as a percentage of the sewer budget. When we looked at the water was somewhere in the mid-30s. Sewer right now in the next few years is over 50% of the enterprise fund budget.
Mr. Montero, just on that note, on the water enterprise for the debt services for the water budget and the sewer budget, big numbers for the next 5 years, big numbers. Any thought, or even is there a potential to roll that into, like, how folks remortgage a house for a 30-year note, because you're looking at almost 12 million. I mean, the sewer is, almost, just doing some quick math, north of 14 million, and the water's 9 million. That's almost $20 million in 5 years. Could we ever revisit the rates or a bond?
So we do refinance our water and sewer debt every chance we get. We don't extend the life of the debt. We try to just improve the interest rates. We're at the point where if we stick to the plan we have, you're going to see a drop off in sewer debt, within the next 5 or 6 years. So extending the life of it's just going to add total interest costs to the projects. I know that's been talked about in the past, but I think we're at the point that we're over the hump in this debt, and I think if we stay the course and use retained earnings to offset the costs, I think over the next 6-7 years you'll be at a point that you'll see rates to start to change and taxes start to change, because 50% of the sewer debt is on the tax levy.
It's just big numbers for both of the for water and sewer. So okay, thank you for that. Ms. Stronach?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment to that. I've been looking at these numbers for a long time now, and I never thought that I would see the sewer rates go under 50. And at one point, I don't know what year that we did refinance those. There was, I think one time I saw a 62. Was that the highest percentage where we were paying 62%? Was in those taxes. was in that rate. So I am actually really pleased to see these drop-offs, and I had written some notes on my thing. I don't disagree with you, but I think staying the course is, considering, I don't know how many times we've changed it since I've been here, and taking it off the levy, we just did that a few years ago too. I mean, we've done significant work in this area, and I hear your point, but I do want you to know that we're constantly working, beating that drum, I think. My other question is, with the debt for the water enterprise, when will that start to drop off? Or will that always be at that 30? Because I feel like that's never moved.
It'll drop off. I mean, we just upgraded the treatment plant a few years back, so you're paying for that, $13 million bond issue. But you're going to be constantly adding debt, $2 million a
To
year
the-
for
to the water.
lines. Yeah, so water is probably going to be constant.
Okay, thank you.
But sewer, you will.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
But sewer, you will.
I'm sorry,
Sewer, you will see a significant drop-off. But every time we do a bond issue, regardless of what the bond issue might be, we look at all of our debt to see where we can save money. And we've saved millions of dollars in our refinancing. And, to the chairman's point, we'll look at everything when we're at that point.
It's just very common for residents to do that with their house and credit
Yep.
cards. So that's a question that we often get is, consolidation. And I get what you're saying. Then you're going to stretch the length of the loan, the life of the loan. But, sometimes there's benefits to save a lot of pennies up front. But it's all about, and I know you do a very good job at that, always looking at that. So thank you.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This next slide shows the revenue projection for sewer. In FY23, the revenue projection is a little over $6.8 million, a little over $5.7 million from user fees, generating a $19,096 surplus based on the revenue that we're projecting. This next slide just gives you an indication of historically the budget compared to revenue in the sewer department, in the sewer enterprise fund. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a note at the bottom that talks about the retained earnings that we use to help reduce debt, to keep rates stabilized within the sewer enterprise fund.
Mr. Montori, you may not have the answer to this question this evening, and that's fine. Maybe you can follow up. But do you have any idea annually now what kind of sewer connections, new connections we're realizing in the system?
It has slowed down significantly. Do you, any idea?
So there are approximately 110 on average per year over the last 5 years.
So about 110 a year. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Now, moving from the budget to the rates, sewer rates also will not increase in FY23. Sewer usage, similar to water, we will use August 21, December 21, and April 21 billing cycles in usage that we generated from our munis reports. Projected sewer for FY23 is 528 million gallons, an increase of 17 million gallons compared to the previous fiscal year rate projection. Collection rate is 95%. This is just an indication of the in-town and out-of-town rates that we have. Again, not increasing. This next slide shows the average sewer bill and the typical sewer bill that we have in town and the different levels of bills based on usage throughout the community. Again, similar to water, we're dealing with some old information in regard to surveys and bills. The state average in 2017 was 862. The MWRA average in 2021 is $1,071. The non-MWRA communities surveyed was 843, and we're at 833. And the reason for that is 50% of our debt's on the tax levy. If the debt was on the, within the sewer rates, that our average bill would probably, I don't want to say it would double, but it wouldn't be far off. And even going back to the water, some of the communities that do have lower water rates than ours, you really have to investigate why they do. They could have debt within their tax levy. A lot of communities subsidize their water system with taxes. We don't do that. We're covering all of our costs. Comments in regard to the sewer rates, 74% of the potential users are connected, compared to FY11 when we had 62%. Future debt, as we just talked about, we always want to keep an eye on the ability to refinance our sewer debt to reduce costs and save money, but we are getting over the hump of the peak of the sewer debt based on the debt structure that was in place. Projection of future years, we always want to keep reviewing the assumptions we're using, use of retained earnings, use of the stabilization fund and other sources to help keep rates stabilized the best we can. Retained earnings, as we mentioned, we're going to continue to use it over the next few years, set aside for keeping debt, reducing debt in the sewer enterprise fund, but also to help pay for capital improvements. The sewer enterprise fund, unlike water, does not contemplate borrowing any funds for any project. And then the last two, the out-of-town users and the state hospital use. These are two areas that we do receive a fair amount of revenue. The state hospital is a big user, generating close to $600,000 in projected revenue. They have exceeded that over the last few years. They've actually generated sewer bills well over $1 million because of their sewer use, but also because they have a combined sewer and drain system that impacts the amount of flow that goes through their system. And then the out-of-town users, we just need to keep an eye on those properties. If Andover ever brings sewer to those areas, and they switch over to the Andover sewer system, that's a $300,000+ revenue loss that we would have in our system. So those are just things we need to not over-project and not gouge. We just need to make sure we're realistic in the projections. And then just before we move on to stormwater, as I mentioned, sewer looks like it could have no increase in FY21 and FY24, but we'll look at that as we get closer, and then increases will start sometime in FY25. But again, those are just projections. Every year is looked at differently based on usage and other factors that impact rates. Stormwater Enterprise Fund, our newest enterprise fund. The slide gives you, outlines the budget for the enterprise fund, which is solely expenses for stormwater compliance, and that's $593,910. This is, again, strictly for permit compliance and maintenance of the system. Also within the stormwater budget, we'll be raising $500,000 within the stormwater fees for capital improvements. That we'll talk about more in a little bit. User fees is projected to generate $1,139,307, generating a surplus of a little over $20,000. Now, the stormwater fee is a little bit more complicated than the water and sewer rates, which are based on usage and has different tiers based on usage. We use an equivalent residential unit as the basis of our stormwater fee. Residential units in town are charged a flat fee of $75 a year. That equivalent residential unit is then translated into a fee for large residential and commercial properties throughout the community. An equivalent residential unit in town is based on 4,443,000 square feet, which the fee is based on, and then we use that calculation and translate a higher per year fee for large residential commercial properties. As you can see from this slide, The projected residential revenue is $693,900. For large residential and commercial, we're projecting $415,407. Beyond the stormwater fee, we're going to project revenue coming from prior year rates that were paid this year, interest on late fees, liens from late rates being paid for a total of an additional $30,000 in revenue. There's no increase, obviously, to the stormwater fee, and we don't anticipate a rate increase in any of the out years. Capital, over the next 5 years, little over $3.1 million, $2,730,000 for drain improvement, $380,000 for project development of stormwater projects. In FY21, we plan to spend $1 million for $950,000 for drainage improvements and $50,000 for project development, which was missing from this slide.
Please, please.
Thank you. When we were implementing this stormwater fee, one of the things that the chairman had asked at the time was he was concerned that we were going to be penalized because we were getting above the curve. I mean, this is a compliance issue, which is one of the reasons we're doing it. Never mind that it's environmentally sound for our future of Tewksbury, but we had charged you with getting to our legislators to ask them that we don't get penalized for this, as we have seen in the past where we get above the curve, and then towns that did not do the hard work got rewarded, similar to the infrastructure and the sewer. So I was wondering, is there any update on that, or is that still status quo? And
yeah, it's pretty much status quo. Yeah, you know, it's status quo. I think we're actually we've benefited from grants that you'll see on the slide that we receive for stormwater work. So I don't think we're being penalized by having a fee at all. If anything, if we didn't have the fee, we would receive fines and penalties, because that's what EPA and DEP will be doing to communities that do not comply with their stormwater permit. So having this fee in place does two things. It allows us to comply with the permit and avoid fines from the Commonwealth and the federal government. But what it's also doing, the most, obviously the importance of stopping pollution. But other than roads, I think that the second largest amount of complaints is drainage in this community. Yeah. All of you have sent pictures to me of flooding. And the only way we're going to address the flooding is improving our drainage. And this is what this enterprise fund is going to do. Now, I know it wasn't, popular to bring something forward to charge a fee, but we had no other way of addressing drainage in this community without the stormwater enterprise fee. In the past, without the fee, we were taking it from Chapter 90, and we weren't paving as many roads. So we're getting complaints on roads and complaints on drainage and not doing enough to address either. So this fee allowed us to do that. I think DPW, Mr. Gilbert, Mr. Hardeman, and their staff have done a great job not only complying with the stormwater fee, but being aggressive with all the projects. And we are out there getting as many grants in any programs that are being offered.
thank you very much. I think that's important for people to understand in a little bit more depth than what you just presented, so I appreciate that feedback.
And just to follow on, you mentioned a few minutes ago about this capital improvement in the stormwater, and I may have misheard you, but there is a $500,000 grant that's involved with that
Correct.
improvement as well. So the money is being well used in the context of the needs that exist.
So the next section of the presentation, and we're almost done, is the capital improvement plan. This is the 5-year plan and the slides that go with it. The first section of slides, I won't go into detail, just gives a summary of all of the projects and all of the different departments, whether it's general fund or enterprise fund, the projects in a particular fiscal year, and then projected in the out years. That's the first two slides. Then the third slide focuses just on the general fund projects that'll either be funded through raise and appropriate, transfer from the stabilization fund, CPA funds, or free cash. And they are mainly facilities and grounds, fire department, in regard to DPW transportation, sidewalks. As you can see, there's sidewalks for $250,000 in FY23, but we're not going to ask for that money until October. And we have enough work on our plate right now that we're going to wait for October to ask for sidewalk money. And then the DPW facility, we have $5 million in here, which means we may use $5 million in existing funds to help pay for the DPW project, but the plan is to borrow $25 million for that project. The next slide is the use of the town's Chapter 90 money and various state and private grants that we may receive on an annual basis. Next slide is the use of retained earnings and enterprise stabilization fund and raise and appropriate from enterprise fund for various projects for sewer, water, stormwater, and telemedia.
Mr. Montori, just to take you back to the Chapter 90, where you have a 5-year projection on pavement management, preventative maintenance, and reconstruction. Does the DPW have a 5-year, like, identified streets that they're targeting? And if so, could you share that with the board at some point?
Sure. Sure, and usually before we go to town meeting, I'll have a list of streets that we plan to do next year.
Thank you.
But we'll provide the board with our projected locations.
Same, I guess, same with sidewalks if we're going to do.
Yeah, we definitely have, we have them for both.
Yeah, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
This next slide is the general fund debt that we will be looking to have town meeting authorize in the fall for the DPW facility, $25 million. That money is already funded within the, is already included in the FY23 budget. Once we finalize the design, have better cost estimates, we'll bring that forward in the fall at October town meeting. Next slide is the enterprise fund debt, mainly for water. As you can see, there's $1.8 million in FY23 for the Astle Street water tank maintenance and upgrades. Then we don't borrow any money in FY24, and then we go back to borrowing money for water distribution system improvements starting in FY25. And then this next slide just is a summary of the capital improvement plan and a summary of the annual costs, not just in FY23, but in FY24. This slide is what we'll be presenting at town meeting in May for approval to fund the following capital items, equipment and vehicles to be transferred from the stabilization fund and CPA funds. We were looking to replace equipment within the vehicles within the DPW, vehicles and improvements to the South Station for the fire department, facilities and grounds improvements, police station upgrades to include improvements to flooring, to the locker rooms, the roll call room at the police department. Facilities is looking to purchase an additional vehicle. And then, so that total is $1,590,000 to come out of the stabilization fund. There's currently a little over 11.4 million in the stabilization fund. If all of these are approved, we'll still have a little over 9.8 million in the stabilization fund. Community preservation funds will be seeking $194,000 for two items. One is a full renovation of the skateboard park, a skate park down at Livingston Recreation Center. This will provide new equipment and upgraded equipment, as well as a full reclamation and resurfacing of the park. We're also looking to purchase new town common benches to replace what we have out there.
That was mentioned. I don't think they're going to last out of the winter out there. So
Yeah.
good call.
Yep. This next slide shows the items that we'll be looking to use water and sewer retained earnings for. Under water retained earnings, there's equipment that we'll purchase that will be split between water and sewer enterprise funds, the hydrant replacement program, and the water tank upgrade, which will be both $1.8 million from retained earnings and a $1.8 million borrowing. Sewer is the remaining 50% of the vehicles that we want to purchase, the inflow and infiltration controls, the pump station improvements. And as you can see, there's enough retained earnings to pay for both enterprise fund projects. And then stormwater, we're looking for $1 million that will be funded both through a grant and $500,000 coming from stormwater enterprise fees. And then finally, Telemedia will pay through our cable franchise fees the $229,500 for the upgrade of the video and sound in the town hall, main hall, and the small meeting room. Just general comments on the capital plan. There's significant DPW equipment that we'll be looking to purchase over the next 5 years to maintain the fleet that allows us to properly maintain our infrastructure. Pavement management. Chapter 90 is the only fund we use to pave any of our roads throughout the community. Right now, that seems to be adequate, but as we're all seeing from this past winter and past year, the amount of roads that are becoming problematic, at some point we may want to look at increasing the amount of money we put towards pavement management. And at some point, we may have to make a decision whether we want to push some of the sidewalk money to paving roads, and get away from for a year or two of installing sidewalks. Stormwater permit compliance, we'll continue to do that. We believe the stormwater fee is more than adequate right now to do that. And again, no plans to raise that. Sidewalks, we know sidewalks are something that are a priority in the community. We'll continue to fund those at $250,000 a year. Again, we won't seek funding for the sidewalks until October, since we have enough on our plate right now. We'll use a combination of complete street grants and the $250,000 to address sidewalks in the community. And then finally, town and school facilities. Maintaining all of our facilities obviously is important. We don't want to get to a point where they are so much beyond repair that we can't maintain them, and we're looking to replace them. We don't want to be in that position again. And then the last slide. This is just future needs to be addressed at October special town meeting. Obviously, from an operating standpoint, we'll be looking at town meeting in October to fund areas, whether there possibly could be school staffing and operations, depending on the school budget at that time. The top priority for the town side of the budget will be public safety staffing and overtime, whether it's adding police officers to the police department or staffing or overtime to run the ambulance full-time. Those are the top priority. DPW, staffing and ongoing infrastructure and facility maintenance continue to be another priority we'll look towards in October. Future capital equipment and improvements that were pushed off to the fall that we'll look to fund. $100,000 for library carpet. Right now, they're in the process of moving forward, probably in the summer, to carpet the first floor of the library. Then we'll seek funding for the second floor of the library in October. As I mentioned, sidewalks, $250,000. Flooring for the town hall annex and carpeting, $25,000. Again, all of these hope to be brought forward in October. We continue to set aside our $600,000 of free cash in case there's a deficit in snow and ice. If there's no deficit or a small enough deficit to free up some of the $600,000, we'll use it to address capital items. We want to replenish the stabilization fund based on what we use on an annual basis. That number needs to be adjusted, but whatever we use in May, we want to replenish next year, if possible, by using free cash. The top priority going into town meeting and going into next October will be the DPW school facility and improvements. And then finally, using any available funds to maintain the town and school facilities, equipment, and infrastructure that may come up after May town meeting that we didn't identify in the capital budget right now that we'll address afterwards. And that's the capital improvement plan. The only other thing I want to mention, and I wanted to mention when we're talking about purchasing of equipment, one of the things that's important to us right now when we talk about purchasing equipment, not only is there a major need for the equipment, but the fire truck is a good example. We may fund that in May, but you're not going to see that truck for a year by the time we get it. It may even be longer based on the supply chain right now. Same thing with DPW trucks. So those who may want to say, well, let's delay them for 6 months or a year, it just delays them that much further for us, and we really need the vehicles. So bringing them forward in May is important to us, and getting them funded and getting them in the queue to be delivered to us in a timely manner is a priority. And that's it.
Questions, comments from the board?
I do have one question. I should have asked it earlier, I apologize, but a few times in your presentation, Mr. Montori, particularly around sewer, you used the phrase around our beloved sewer pumps, sewer pump station improvements, and we have a fair amount of expense associated with that. So it may just be the term you're using. I'm just trying to clarify in my own mind. I know we have maintenance obligations because those things are constantly running. When you use the term improvement, are we trying to upgrade the pump station so that the maintenance costs will be reduced over time? And are the improvement expenses that you have reflected in here things that will diminish over time, or are you using improvement to really mean maintenance?
So it's a combination of all of them, and I think I'll let Kevin, you guys can chime in afterwards, but there have been instances that we have made improvements to pump stations to increase capacity. We have made, a lot of the improvements are just age of the pumps itself within the pump stations, the mechanical components within the pump station that need to be upgraded and replaced. The sewer system, parts of the sewer system are new and the other parts are old, and these pump stations are going to have to be replaced or upgraded. So I think these are more normal maintenance and upgrades that you would need to do to a pump station that range from all of the items you mentioned.
So
And it will just one of these, so and because of the age and the problems we have in some of our pump stations, it does cost us overtime. So making the improvements in cases will help.
So I guess where I'm going, if I remember the number right, it was like $1.7 million over the next 5 years, if I recall correctly. So my question is it reasonable to assume that when we go out 5 years from there, are we doubling that money in 10 years, or is there a return on that 1.7 that will kind of reduce some of the long-term costs? Do you have any thoughts about that? I realize that these things are an absolute necessity, and it's a bear of an issue for us. It's just the way our system was constructed, but
So the improvements.
do me a favor, just grab a microphone, okay? Thank you. I'm sorry. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. So like Mr. Montori said, the improvements kind of are twofold. They're to really upgrade and bring the stations into modern technology. But also there are improvements that can be made which will reduce maintenance. Heather Row is a great example. We installed an inline grinder last winter. I spoke with the sewer guys today. We were talking about different things. And I said, how's Heather Row? I said, we don't go there for calls anymore. And that was a station that they were cleaning twice a week. They'd clean it on Friday in hopes that they wouldn't have to go in over the weekend. So they, and I did an analysis of about a 60-day period, and the overtime cost for that station was around $10,000. And that's then been eliminated effectively. So there are improvements like that, Monroe Circle, Regina S, that we're looking at doing, but also really upgrading the systems to improve that technology and capability.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I recognize we're stuck with the infrastructure construction that we have, right? So, but it just posed the question, are we improving or are we maintaining? So I appreciate it. Thanks for the color.
Any other comments from the board?
No, just again, this is well done. Very, very transparent. And when we started with enterprise funds, we were sitting at this table. We've come a long, long way. So again, kudos to Mr. Montori and his team.
Residents often do ask, what's the plan? Well, there's the plan. You know, we can always make an audible, you never know. But, you know, we have a plan on paper, and looking back at the previous plans, we pretty much stick to the, execute those plans. So like to Mr. Johnson's point, good stuff, good strategy and planning for the community.
Yeah, can I just add briefly? Your priorities came across loud and clear through your plan. They're well described, and I appreciate as you go through. We're looking for this at town meeting. We're looking for this at town meeting, and this will be on the website tomorrow, so folks can look at that as well. Particularly the parts that will appear at the end of the presentation. That's how it will appear for a town meeting. But I do appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that's continuing to go into the DPW school facility project. So I thank you guys for your ongoing work, and I look forward to seeing upgraded plans there and budget for that as well. So
Thank you. And you brought up a good point. So this will be on the website. I have some things to clean up that need to be corrected, but also I'll be putting together, also all the enterprise funds will be on the website. I'll send those out to the board. Also putting together the 5-year plan you see in the presentation tonight. That's the summary. That's the Excel workbook. That's a summary. What we'll put together over the next couple of days and get on the website and get out to the board is a document as thick as the presentation tonight with all the narratives behind what we're requesting, and spreadsheets for all the years. So much more detailed than we provided tonight.
When you post that, would you also, if you can, post maybe like a 5-year history of the water rates and sewer rates?
Sure.
I think that would be instrumental for people to see as well.
and the how the debt exclusions are going.
All right, any other comments? All right, seeing that, gentlemen, thank you very much as usual. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. All righty. Anyone want to take a quick break, or are we going to mush through?
Wow.
We're good? All right, seeing we're good, this is the zoning bylaw committee, general updates on retail marijuana. I think Mr. Mackey and Mr. Johnson, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I'll handle that, and Mr. Mackey can correct anything that I misstate here, but this won't take very long. First of all, Mr. Mackey and I, as you know, represent this board on the zoning bylaw committee, and we had what may hopefully be our last meeting earlier this month. And we have tied down what we believe to be a very solid bylaw revision for the zoning in the community. We have the absolute intention of putting the article before the town meeting in May. So we're hopeful that residents who attend town meeting will find their way to be supportive of that. A lot of effort and time went into it. I think we improved what lost by 2 votes a year ago in a number of ways, and over the next 2-3 months, we'll make effort to educate people a little bit more clearly around what those changes were. So that's important. The reason we have it on the agenda this evening is one area that was discussed at great length by the committee was the subject of retail marijuana. And I will say 2 things for clarity's sake. There are other aspects of marijuana cultivation, medical marijuana, other aspects that are currently within the town's structure. The only thing we're going to talk about here this evening is the one and only topic of retail marijuana sales. So everything else is pre-existing. The committee unanimously felt that we should move forward with adding retail marijuana to the zoning bylaw. But one of the terrific byproducts of the process that we followed is that during our last public input session, we had a resident get up and begin to ask questions of the zoning bylaw committee around the subject area of regulatory control and approval of licenses, et cetera, around the retail marijuana topic. And what that did to, with respect to the zoning bylaw committee, is that area, that side of this equation was not, and nor is it, part of the mission of the zoning bylaw committee. So it left us kind of scratching our heads in the context of, if we put it in the zoning bylaw and we go to town meeting and residents raise the same kind of concerns and questions, which are very valid, about, is it going to be locally controlled? Are we going to defer to the state? What are the rules of the road if you're going to have a retail marijuana facility in Tewksbury? It led the committee to believe that there was tremendous risk of confusion and a lack of clarity around that second component. So what we decided to do was to make it known that the committee supports the concept of retail marijuana, and both the planning board representatives and Mr. Mackey and I were asked to come back to our respective boards. And what we'd like to do this evening is ask the Board of Selectmen and the town manager and his team, as appropriate, to take up the topic of the regulatory components that are necessary so we can give the town's residents guidance on the vision of how it would be executed in Tewksbury. Would people come to this board? Would we maintain local control, or would we be deferring to the state? We need to decide those things. And it seemed to us that it would be unfair to ask residents to vote on the zoning bylaw, including retail marijuana, if we can't answer the rest of the questions. It was beyond the purview of the zoning bylaw committee. So our hope is, because we believe that it is something that we should pursue, our hope is that we can use the time between now and the October town meeting to answer those questions, and to present a warrant article potentially in October that would be a dual functioning discussion. One would change the zoning bylaw, and two would address any general bylaws or regulatory components that have to be spoken to. And that way residents would have a lot more clarity around the path that we wish to follow. So the ask tonight is that we move out on that subject beyond, either this board taking control of it or asking the town manager and his team to begin to put a framework or recommendation together that we can consider. Lacking that, we'd have a zoning bylaw request, if you will, but we'd have no guardrails around how we would enforce or regulate the licensing component. I don't know, is there anything else I'm missing or you want to add, James?
Thank you. Yeah, no, great summary. The only thing I wanted to add was it's not recreating the wheel. We're not an early adopter anymore. All the data's out there. I think that some preliminary discussions with Mr. Montori that this is probably very easily solvable from the perspective of how the licensing is handled. It's very important, just because it isn't not an excessive lift doesn't mean it's not important, but I think this is absolutely something we should be able to have a framework on and move forward for October. Largest concern being this is over $1 billion industry in the state. We have the ability to bring some of that money to Tewksbury. And I think that's something important that we should be doing. And I think that appears to be the general consensus. So.
Excellent updates. Ms. Wellman, Ms. Strada?
Go ahead, Mr. Roy.
Oh,
I am and continue to be in favor of this source of revenue for the town. I would have liked to has been early adopters.
Ms. Wellman?
Yeah, I support the zoning bylaw committee's initiative here. I was curious where you were planning to zone it. Has that been decided and mapped and so forth?
The thought was it would be zoned in the general business district, and that would run, if I recall correctly, from the Lowell, Tewksbury town line up to, I believe, just past where Walmart is,
Yep.
a little further up in that area.
Okay. Thank you for that. No, I support that, and I would be interested in seeing what we would come up with for local regulation. So I would think it would come to this board. But yeah, we'll see. I prefer local control, but I'm curious to see what we come up with. So thank you for the work that you've done in that area. I look forward to bringing that forward to the community.
And thank the board, just good decision-making, perfectly logic and great decision-making, not to confuse folks, so good work, very good work.
All right, so I would just, I don't know that we have to take a vote per se, but I think what's important is that there be clarity and an indication from this board that we're going to take action on that and do the research, so that by August, when the warrant closes for the October special town meeting, that there's a plan to present. So I just, that's an important component to the discussion that we've had.
So would the fair ask then be to, obviously, we want to get through this town meeting, but kick the ball over to Mr. Montori and staff to kind of start formalizing some of those discussions that have been had into what the regulatory side looks like? I think from what we had, there is probably a pretty good idea on zoning. Again, not finalized because it's not part of this change, but the work has been done, that's already been looked at, so that's probably a fairly easy lift.
Agreed.
I was just going to say similarly to what Mr. Mackey was saying, was not just kick the ball over, but to actually ask the town manager to come up with the process on who should be doing the research and who should be involved in that, so that we're making sure that there is a process and for residents to have a say in that process. I don't know where that fits in the mix, but
If I can just jump in, so
Please.
we've been working with Selectman Mackey and Selectman Johnson in their role on the zoning bylaw committee on this issue, so we have a good understanding of what needs to be done. The Assistant Town Manager has done a fair amount of research, the Community Development Director also, Alex Lauder. So I think, especially now that we've gotten the bulk of the budgetary stuff out of the way, and we'll start this before town meeting, and we'll start really digging in, and hopefully shortly after town meeting, we'll be able to bring something to the board. Because it'd be nice if the board can have this wrapped up as far as a regulatory approach sometime before June, so we're going into the summer with it all done, and, we're not scrambling at town, in August when we're doing the warrant article. So we're going to make this a priority from the administration standpoint, and, start on it right away.
And I don't want to, Mr. Mack, you might have said, or Mr. Johnson, I don't want to trivialize the work, but at this point, it's just rinse and repeat for many communities that have been there, done it, seen it. So hopefully we can, with the outreach there, you guys know what to do there, and
Agreed.
not reinvent the wheel, beg, borrow, and steal.
And let me just stress one more time, I said it at the beginning of my comments, but the zoning bylaw committee was unanimous in its view that this should be part of the tool set that we work with in Tewksbury. So the intention is to be supportive of it and make the change at the appropriate time, but lacking the second part of that, and it was not in our purview, it created a dilemma for us.
Makes sense, yep.
So, okay?
Okay, well stated, thank you very much. All right, if there's nothing, Mr. Montori, we're going to move to you. I think you have one invoice pending.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's one invoice for town council for January 1st through January 15th in the amount of $2,805, and I would recommend approval.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion, and I have a second by Mr. Mackey. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And Mr. Montori, before I let you go, can we just touch upon the potholes for the residents? I know we've all got a lot of calls, and we're suggesting that, obviously, log a call with the DPW, but just give the community, the residents, just a picture of the four, because we know what's going on, but just I want to share that with the residents.
So the DPW's had 4 crews working on potholes over the past week. I forget the amount of tonnage that we've used over the past few days. The director had mentioned it today at staff meeting, but, they are out there. They're prioritizing the potholes. We are, every community is facing this issue. They want to use, the hot mix from the plant as much as, when they can. They don't want to just throw cold patch in. They'll be going back every, day to do it. Some of the delays had to do with the amount of water in the streets and trying to get the, waiting for it to dry up a little bit. But they are out there. They're attacking it as much as they can. As long as they don't get pulled away for other emergencies, they'll continue it on a daily basis. Anybody has any issues, they can go online and fill out a DPW request, or they can call the DPW and just, indicate where the pothole is and let us know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, that was important to bring it up. I know we're all receiving a lot of calls, and we drive the roads as well, so. All right, very good. Anything else, Mr. Montori, on your side?
That is it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, it's going to bring us to minutes. We have some minutes this evening.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we were able to catch up on a number of minutes here, so I believe we've got 6 for tonight. So I'd like to put forward minutes for September 28th, 2021, October 19th, 2021, October 27th, 2021, November 9th, 2021, December 21st, 2021, and January 11th, 2022.
Second.
6 all total. I have a motion. I have a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous 5-0. Thank you very much for getting those, getting a bulk of those caught up. Yep. Folks do ask for those, so perfect. Thank you. All right, board member reports. How about Ms. Wellman?
Thank you very much. Really quickly, it's getting late. So our NIMCOG meeting's tomorrow night. We are doing a second hiring round for an executive director, so that's ongoing. I wanted to let folks know that the town today signed the DLTA agreement, that's a technical assistance for the housing production plan and the MBTA housing analysis. Remember the MBTA housing piece that came before us last time? So NIMCOG will be giving us some technical assistance to help with that work, identifying the requirements there and so forth. So that was signed today by the town. And so previously, regarding the paving, coming in April for Route 38. I had asked for a calendar for DOT to put together a project calendar so that residents and businesses would know approximately what areas were going to be impacted on a week-by-week basis, so that they could make plans accordingly. Tonight, I would like to ask that the project team at DOT do a public information session and give an opportunity for people, particularly business owners along Main Street, but residents as well, to have an understanding of what's going to happen with their parking lots, because some of the work that was done in South Tewksbury changed the way people could enter a parking lot down there, and it changed the way that people could move in that parking lot. It's kind of constricted it a little bit. So that's a concern. I've been approached by a couple of business owners in the upcoming sections that they're concerned about drainage, like everybody else is in this town, but also their curbing that's going to be impacting, since so many parking lots are just completely open to Route 38. So how is that going to change? So I'm asking a public information session from the project team, and I'd like to have a date for that meeting by our next meeting. So in 2 weeks, I'd like to have a date from DOT about when they can do that public information session. I know they can do it. I've seen them do it. I've participated in them, so I'd like to have them do it for this project. And then the last thing, we're still waiting for SurveyMonkey to turn on. So I'm hopeful that the town will be able to get that sorted out, and the DEI survey is ready to go. And we'll bring it back to you once you can look at it on SurveyMonkey. So, and it is going out to department heads in paper form for them to review, and then we'll bring back their comments to you. Okay?
Very good, thank you. How about Ms. Stronach?
Thank you. Just 2 items. First of all, the Public Events Committee is going to be meeting February 24th at 7 o'clock here at Town Hall. And then just a quick update on the Elementary Building Committee meeting. We met last week. The days are running together last week. And I know that you had asked for a site visit tour. So on March 2nd at 3:30, you are all invited to come and take a tour of the new school. Please dress appropriately. It is a construction area, and we don't want to have to send people home, because we have had that happen in the past. We also invited the school committee to this meeting. The mock classroom will be there as well. And then just, we had a really great meeting at the last week, and interesting that the project is 65% complete to date, and 71% of the funds have been spent, and currently we are still on budget. So we're pretty excited about that. And the next big milestone is the center school. And the center school is going to, the residents of the center school, the administration and the facilities and the IT are going to be moving out of that building and into the old fire station in March. We are hopeful that that's going to be the timeline that we're going to be putting forward, and then they're going to start to dismantle the center school. Our next building committee meeting is going to take place at the Ryan School, so that we can have a community outreach prior to our meeting. So we'll be meeting at 5:30. We're changing the date because it's going to be at the Ryan School, and I believe their open house was in the next time. So we'll make sure that you all have that, but keep your eyes open for that. We want to make sure that residents in the area are aware of that, because that part of the project's going to create a lot of dust and a little bit of noise for residents. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about Mr. Johnson?
Beyond the zoning bylaw committee update, I have nothing else this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, thank you. How about Mr. Mackey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to start with a little bit of color on the minutes. I know that there have been a number of requests for them. So we had a significant backlog that we had to work through with a number of boards and committees with the service provider we use. We've gotten back on track, so the intent is to not have another delay like that. Moving on to the website has gone live. Press has done a press release. We did a press release on it. The one thing I wanted to reiterate is there are a number of minutes, videos, documents that are still to be moved over. If somebody has a need for one of those documents, sets of minutes, please reach out to the staff or the town clerk. those are available. They haven't gone away. They're not being deleted. They are just still in transition. Now that the website is up, I'm going to be working with the IT staff, shifting focus to cybersecurity, getting our cybersecurity program up, and that's going to be the next few months is kind of baselining for that. And finally, March 2nd, we have our next Economic Development Committee meeting. We are looking to get that committee back on track. There's been a significant amount of outreach to the committee members trying to align, as well as working with Alex Louder on kind of intent, purpose, and making sure that we can have meaningful meetings and get some good out of that committee. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Reuse committee, we're going to do the outreach as well to all the committees, and we're going to use the, what's it called? Survey Monkey? Yeah, so we're going to use that as well. We're going to partner with Alex as well on that, so stay tuned there. Just a quick update on Shaw Street and Arlington Street. If you recall, we had a few residents that were concerned. It's kind of like a little funky way. So we had Kevin Hardeman go down there with the safety police, and they're just weighing options. What do they do? What do we not do? Obviously associated costs, so that's good news for the residents. It definitely improved there. It's definitely like a quality of life. You can see the cars buzz down that little road there, so I'll update the board there on behalf of that body of work. And last but not least, Mr. Montori, and maybe Ms. Wellman, you can help me. There was a decision in Andover based on South Street.
I was just going to ask.
Do you have the address? It was the 1023 South?
I think so. At
So-
the end.
So the residents have been asking, so this went to Andover, the zoning board of appeals. They denied the applicant, so then they had 21 days to appeal. We're getting to that crossroad now where it's almost up to the 21 days, so maybe follow up with Mr. Clemente in Andover to say, what's the latest, what's next steps? They had a cease and desist, so it's kind of, we've been quiet. But I think that 21-day period is almost up this week, I think. So we don't have to take a vote, but if you could follow up.
Absolutely.
I know Mr. Sawick has been on top of it, but the residents are saying, okay, what next? Right, so thank you, so. All right, very good, that's all I had. So anything else before we close?
Just really briefly, you attended and I attended a ceremony last week for the 50th anniversary of the natural gas explosion that was held at the fire station. Fire department did a nice job, and we were joined by members of the departments from Billerica, who also lost a firefighter in that explosion and subsequent fire, and Wilmington as well. And so I want to send my appreciation to those other communities and for our department for taking the time to recognize. We had many special guests who were there that evening, including the police chief, the fire chief's dad, Ed Kearns, so who's a big part of making sure that happened, and also Bob Fowler, who was affected by that fire as well.
Great call. All right, I'd look for a motion to adjourn, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, please.
I'm going to offer a motion to go into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Let me look at, so we're going to go into, so how, you can help me with the procedure here. I know we have to enter executive session, but I'd like to make a motion that we're not going to re-enter into the public forum.
Yeah.
So moved.
Okay, and so just for the residents, it's to discuss the town manager's contract. That's why we're going to an executive session. So with that being said, I look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to move into executive session for purposes of contract negotiation.
Okay. And
I need a roll call on that.
Yeah, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a second roll call vote to enter. Mr. Mackey, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Stronach?
Aye.
Ms. Wellman? Chair votes aye as well, so we're officially entered into executive session. And at this point, Brian, you can kill the live feed. We're not going to come back to open session. We're going to adjourn in executive session.
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we adjourn the meeting at the conclusion of executive session.
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much.